Emily, you're muted.
Thanks, Lucas. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel, Landing Your Tech Internship student panel, and welcome to Gear Up, presented by Hack the North as well. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We'll get started. Thank you to my lovely 4 panelists for joining me on this panel. They're going to talk a bit about their internship experiences and also be answering some questions from the audience near the end. So you can leave those in the Slido in the chat. Before we get into the questions, we'll get everyone to introduce themselves first. So Carol, do you want to start? So
yeah,
your name, where you've worked interned before, and what you're currently up to.
Yeah, hi, I'm Carol. I've actually interned at 2 places. I interned at Hatch Canada back in 2017. It's a small ed tech startup, but it was really nice because they work on like programming education technology, so it was kind of meta. That it was what I was doing there. And then afterwards, I worked at Shopify. I actually went back 3 times, so I did 4 times there. And I worked on merchant marketing, and then my last team there was on a compiler called Truffle Ruby. Currently I work at an AI startup in Toronto called Cohere. I've been here for like a year and a half now. And also we're hiring for winter interns, so if you're looking.
Thanks, Carol. Parth, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Parth. I'm currently studying at the University of Waterloo. I'm studying mechatronics engineering, and I'm currently in my 3rd year. I've done a decent amount of internships in the past, I think 5 of them, and I'm on my 6th technically. I started out with hardware kind of things, moved into software, then did machine learning at Deloitte, then worked at distributed systems at Tesla. And most recently, I was at Apple doing software engineering for Siri. And now I've kind of transitioned a little bit, doing a little bit more PM things, so product management, also for Siri, but a completely different ballgame.
Cool. Thanks, Parth. Lucas?
Hey everyone, my name is Lucas. I went to NYU and dropped out this past year. I have previously interned at a e-commerce startup based in New York called Masonette. I then interned at a print mail API company called Lob based in San Francisco. And then I interned at Coda this past summer and then ended up joining them full time right now.
And last but not least, Maisha.
Hi, my name is Maisha. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in my 4th and final year of computer science at McGill University. I've previously interned at Morgan Stanley, Google, and most recently, Asana.
All right, amazing. Thanks, everyone, for doing a brief intro. Now that we know a bit about everyone here, we can get into the questions. I'm curious to hear how some of you guys got started in tech. What was like, where did you first develop an interest? What was like kind of the start of your story?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So I actually started, my first programming experience was at a hackathon. I didn't go because I wanted to code. I was told there was free food, and that's how you convince teenagers to do things. And I didn't code at that first hackathon, but I came back for more free food. And at some point down the line, I ended up programming, and it turns out I really, really loved it. And it also turns out that hackathons, the hand-on experience, was a really great way of building really great skills and a nice network. In terms of like what interested me, like that's really it. It's not that special. I do really enjoy it now, but what drew me in was just pizza.
Yeah, I can share my story too. In high school, I was always involved with entrepreneurship. I was selling longboards my junior year of high school, and then making thousands of dollars from that. And then when I was choosing a place to go to college, I was thinking, I'm going to study business because you need to know business to start your own company, right? So I actually went into college as a pure business major and found myself working on my own business ideas in the entrepreneurship center, then got drawn into the VC side of things when a fund called Contrary Capital pulled me in as a venture partner. From that experience, it pulled me into the VC world, interned at a bigger firm my summer of that freshman year. And that's when I was introduced to the beautiful world of tech as it is today. Really showed me from that experience that if you a lot of the businesses today that are venture scaled, large billion-dollar companies are software based. And as Mark Andreessen says, software is eating the world. So I started a double major in computer science and did a full stack web dev course on Udemy, actually. I'd say 90% of the practical CS skills that I use today at work, all from the Udemy course. School, I actually did, what, 3, 4 CS classes before dropping out, you know? So, goes to show.
Yeah, both of you have like both of your experiences kind of started off not the most like traditional or common way of like going into school. So that's really cool. All right. The next question is also related to kind of the starts, how everyone here got kind of started in tech. I'm curious to hear what some of the challenges you guys faced while starting off and how you overcame them.
So I guess I can start with this one. One challenge that I experienced in particular, and a lot of my friends went through the same thing, was the issue of having like a lack of confidence. So in particular, I find it's incredibly easy to downplay your accomplishments. Like maybe you create something incredible at a hackathon, but then when other people ask you about it, you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support from mentors and things like that. But I think you should really take credit for the things that you achieve, the things that you build, and don't sell yourself short.
Yeah, for sure. We actually have a not to plug this panel or anything, but we do have a talk on imposter syndrome, and I think that's a feeling that a lot of people, especially when you just start off in tech, can relate to. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think for me, one challenge was just like getting my first job. It was like the very circle, can't get a job without job experience. What ended up working well for me was like doing some hackathon projects and then cold emailing people. I think emails are definitely a lot more effective than any kind of messaging. And honestly, like all it really took was to like sell myself as a person in a way where someone would take a chance on me, and then like when someone did, that's like really how it goes. And I think especially even for a lot of like really smart people I've met, it took someone to like take a chance on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Finding that very first job or internship is definitely very tough. And hopefully, yeah, we'll go into some more tips from everyone here to hopefully help everyone in the audience if you are in that position right now looking for your very first job. So kind of relating, going back to looking for your first job, how did everyone here gain or learn their like technical experience? So Lucas, you mentioned you took some Udemy courses. How did everyone else here kind of develop those skills and gain some experience?
Yeah, I guess I can start off. So for me, I actually pretty much hated software, especially early on in high school. Might have had to do something with learning Turing in high school, and not a different programming language. But anyways, came into university and I went to a hackathon. Actually, it was Hack North, and I was working on a really cool project with some people from Australia, and it was an awesome experience. And that kind of started me off with, okay, maybe I do want to do programming. And so for me, a lot of it was kind of done on my own time. You know, courses help you with a little bit of really getting that strong foundation of algorithms and data structures. But I think a lot of the applicable skills that you learn, which are useful on the job, you kind of have to do on your own. And so in my opinion, like hackathons and exactly as Lucas, like Udemy courses, but then also even just reaching out to your friends. I think there's a lot of people who build some really incredible things, and you know, leaning on them and trying to understand what all they use and how they go about learning new things is a great way to learn for yourself.
Yeah, to add on to my own experience, the Udemy course is probably the most impactful thing, but it wasn't the sole way I learned how to program. I used Codecademy a lot for learning JavaScript. I signed up for Treehouse as well. I ended up paying for their membership as well to learn programming. I did free code camps, online React course. On top of that, I did, I think it's like, I read a bunch of books. Like, you think you know JavaScript or something like that. It's the book series. Like, there are so many different resources out there to learn how to program, and it's up to you to find what best works for you. I mention Udemy whenever I talk about how I learned how to program, because that for me was very project based and helped me learn like the practical ways of programming, where Codecademy, taught me JavaScript, what a for loop, array, all this stuff was. But like, I found for me, it was a lot easier to learn it in a project context.
There's actually someone in the chat asked if you know which specific Udemy course you took.
I will look it up and link it, I guess, in Discord or send it to you.
Yeah.
Or answer it on side up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else wanted to share where they gained a lot of their first like technical experience from? Okay. If not, we can move on. We can move on to the next question. Sorry. So most of you have worked in a pretty diverse range of roles and at different companies of like different sizes and stages. So for all the people who are relatively newer to the tech industry, yeah, could you guys give like a brief rundown of some of the differences you experienced during your internship, whether that's like how the recruiting process was or the actual experience during the internship, how those varied from like company to company, like startup versus those like FANG or really big companies, for example?
I think I can start with this one. So to reiterate, I've interned at Morgan Stanley, Google, and Asana. So all like medium to large companies with really good like engineering practices and all that. And I think the biggest difference between my experiences was definitely due to the type of work that I was doing. So in my first internship, I sought out like data science and machine learning work. My second one, more backend, full stack. And in my last one, cybersecurity. And I think that definitely gave like a different level, like flavor, different spice into my experience with those organizations. So I would definitely recommend if you're like going to many internships, spice up the type of work you're doing because you'll be surprised at what you enjoy.
Yeah, definitely recommend trying out everything. The biggest company I've ever worked for is my current company, and there's like 160 people. I haven't done any of the FANGs before. That was very intentional on my part. I love the autonomy that you get, and autonomy that you get working at a small startup and the different learnings you can have as, especially as someone young and an intern. They give you a lot more responsibility, I feel, when you're at a startup than if you were at a bigger company. But on the flip side of that, you do get less mentorship and guidance as well, because they have less staff and less of a formal program to dedicate towards mentoring and developing you as an employee. Yeah, but it's, try it. You have several summers in college. I highly recommend you do everything. I wish I did a Google one just to see what it's like. Maybe I would have been bored, but who knows? I heard they got good food.
I have a few things to say on it as well. So I started off with hardware, like basically right after I finished grade 12. And that was a very interesting internship. I kind of got to prototype different things and learn different things from people, but not a lot of mentorship per se, just because, not enough resources to give me, which sometimes does happen, especially with smaller companies. You will kind of just have to bootstrap things on your own, go on Google, literally just sit there for a while and understand how things work. So having kind of seen, the big company side of things as well as the small company side of things, exactly is kind of what Lucas was referring to. You definitely have a lot more autonomy. At the same time, when you're picking an internship, you want to see kind of what things you value, especially early on in your career. You might want to, maybe you're in the like go fast, break things fast kind of mindset, where you definitely want to, go at a startup first, where you're like, I want to learn as many things as possible. And that's kind of where I was at. I went to a startup initially, and you can also have the other kind of mindset. You're like, I want to learn from really great engineers or really great product people who, have lots and lots of years of experience in an industry and a specific domain, and you really go get mentorship within that specific domain. So there's a couple ways to think about it. I don't think that there's like one way is better than the other necessarily. It's really what works well and fits for you.
Yeah, sorry, not to pile on, but in my experience, the distinction often isn't between a big company and a small company. I've had like similar and different experiences at all of them. Having worked at 3 teams at Shopify, I think it is a lot about the team. And there are startups where there will be a lot of mentorship and a lot of processes and product managers and whatnot. And there are teams at really large companies where there is a lot of autonomy, experimentation. So at Shopify, one of my first teams worked with the Facebook team. And so because of that, there weren't excessive processes, but there were more processes because we had to integrate with another company, and we had so many existing users. In my last internship at Shopify, we worked on an experimental compiler. So it was a lot more startup energy in terms of building things quickly, experimenting and whatnot.
Yeah, that's definitely true how much your experience can vary just based on the company, even if you're just based on the team, even if you're within the same company. Kind of touching on that, do you guys have any tips on choosing either a company or a team, how to know if a team is a good fit for you, or if the work that they do or culture is a good fit?
Yeah, I personally always follow people. I think it's so important to have really good people with you, especially your manager. It'll come up a lot later, but it's just so good for your quality of life and for your technical development and for your ability to not suffer to have a good manager. And it's also the same case where you want someone who's fits you technically. I think one mistake I did was I really wanted to chase people who are very technically competent, but it is the case that especially when me starting out past a certain level of technical competence, that wasn't they were more competent than they could impart onto me, and at a certain point I should have looked for more ability in terms of mentorship skills and leadership and whatnot.
I think where I usually get the best signal is actually during the interview process. So I try not to vet it too much before I apply, because when you're actually talking to the engineers, the designers, or the salespeople at the organization, I think that's when you get a really good signal on if the company is a good match for you or if you can learn a lot from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And especially if I know when I was applying to my first jobs, a lot of people just told me to apply to as many as possible at first. You don't have to have a very strict vetting process, especially if it's one of your first internships. You can get, if you do have multiple offers, you can, vet then from your interview experience and things like that. But yeah, just to put that out there as well. Going back to what I think one of you touched on earlier in the earlier question around figuring out a goal, what your goals are for the internship, and how that can guide what company you want to work at. I'm curious as to how all of your goals, what your goals were for your first internship and how those evolved as your internships have gone on.
I think one big pivot that I noticed that I did between maybe first and second year was that I was really excited about machine learning, and I thought I was going to be a machine learning engineer. I was going to do a PhD in machine learning, and that was going to be my path. And I think the experiences and the projects that I created and the internships that I had in machine learning were definitely a blast. But I think I realized that that systems element of software also really appealed to me, and that I wanted to give it a chance. And I think I'm really glad that I did that. So I think one thing is that I had these preconceptions of what I wanted out of first year. And after actually being neck deep in machine learning, I realized that I have a variety of interests, and those interests are dynamic, and I shouldn't necessarily stick with one thing that I'm interested in because without exploring other things.
Yeah, to be very honest, for my first internship, my goal was to just get a software engineering internship. My resume was all business, working in VC. I was just happy to go write code for someone else and maybe get paid for it. But after that first experience, I was at a Series A startup in New York. I was, an intern on a team of maybe 12 engineers. So as you can imagine, thrown into the fire, not much mentorship there. So definitely that helped me decide for my next internship. A goal for my next internship is to find somewhere where there's a bigger team, more systems in place, somewhere where I can learn how to write good software. Definitely got all of that at my second internship. I got the mentorship, learned how to write good code, clean code, efficient code. But in that experience, I did miss some of the product oriented stuff like product design and UX design stuff that I really wanted to get into and learn more about. And that helped me decide on what I want to get out of my next internship. So take each experience as your own learning experience. Like whatever job you go to is just a step. It's not going to be the end all be all. So go to each experience with a hypothesis that you want to test and learn more about, test it, and then use that to decide on the next thing you want to learn.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, I really like that. For me, I was very much caught up in the Cali or bus mentality, especially early on when I came into Waterloo. It's super popular here, but like I've also seen it very, very prominent in other schools too. So feels like it's kind of spreading. And the biggest piece of advice that I got from my upper years was really like, this entire idea of figuring out your goals and tailoring your applications. And when you do interview, tailoring it for that just gives you a much more rewarding experience. And so for me, much like Maisha, I did start out with machine learning at Deloitte, and exact same thing happened to me. I was like, oh, I actually do enjoy software engineering, like, and enjoy like these systems and the technical aspect of doing systems design and putting these different building blocks together and having an entire working system created. And for me, I was essentially looking for those roles, and even in the future, I understand kind of what I want in those roles, and I feel exploring is the best way to go about it. I know a lot of people will go back to the same company, same role because they had a good experience, and there's that being the devil's advocate in that sense. You can also definitely do that, because if you do really enjoy something and you're like, what, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or I want to do this for the next 5-6 years, then that's also very fair. Go for it. But if you do feel like, what, I really do enjoy this, but I have other things I can try out, push yourself out there and try new things.
Yeah, I loved like the common theme that I think all of you touched on around us trying as many different things as possible, and like the analogy of testing your hypothesis. I think it's worth emphasizing that it's perfectly okay if your goals change, and that's probably good. That means you're learning from your internship experiences. So yeah, goals evolve over time and based on all those experiences. All right. So now kind of getting into, I think what a lot of people probably are wondering or thinking, especially if it's their first internship, what are some concrete strategies or advice that you all would give for me if I'm currently looking for an internship right now?
Yeah, I can start. For me, like specifically what worked for me was a cold email. Sorry, that's wrong. What worked for me was about 100 cold emails. Yeah, that works really great. A lot of people have. My second internship was pulled out of the void. It sometimes happens. Sorry, but in terms of like, I put my resume into the void and someone found it. It's very cool. Networking is definitely a very common one, especially if you meet someone at a small company. That tends to work really, really well. Turns out people like working with people they like. That's definitely a really powerful force. The last one I'd recommend is apply to Cohere. We had a few interns last summer who were at their first job, and they did really well.
So I think one thing that has been really successful for me in the past is actually a little bit orthogonal to what Carol was talking about. And saying that like attending company events and talking to recruiters or engineers or employees at hackathons or at their online webinars, I think really getting in touch with people who are deeply connected with the company is super helpful. And even if you can't go to, even if like that company's not visiting your campus, maybe there's an upper year who worked there previously, and you should reach out and ask them about it.
I've in the past done like a collection of both. So I love going to the in-person events and like the actually getting the face-to-face time with recruiters. Like those used to be my favorite up until COVID, basically. But even before that, I was always either not as much doing cold emailing, but I would do a lot of cold messaging on LinkedIn. More recently, I've been using Twitter, and Twitter's been a lot more relaxed platform. Just kind of getting to know people for who they are, and then building a much more genuine connection. But I still do think LinkedIn is great for that kind of more um, transactional like relationship, in the sense where you reached out to a recruiter, you're like, hey, this is my resume, here's like me, this is a little bit about me, this is why I think I'd be a good fit, blah blah blah, please hire me, type of thing. And for me, both of those kind of have worked. In the past, I have used LinkedIn to reach out to engineering managers. That's pretty much how I landed my Tesla role earlier, which I reached out to the manager, saw a post that he was hiring, we built a relationship, and I ended up interning there. For Apple, Apple was a little bit different. I was pulled out of the void, but I did have a referral for it. So it was a little bit interesting. Still, I'd say, getting pulled out of the void is very different. And the process looks a lot more different. But I would say, even getting things such as referrals can be very helpful. Yeah.
I'd say definitely play to your strengths. Mine was being a business student, having an entrepreneurial background, and leveraging that when speaking to companies. I want to join your company because I want to help make your business better. I love building products and making customers happy. They love hearing that. They don't want to hear about how you aced your algorithms course or did all the leak code problems. They want to hear how you're gonna, help them make money and give the better experience to their customers. On that note, though, two of the internships I did get were through fellowships that venture capital firms offered. A few of them are like the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship, NEA Fellowship, Bessemer Venture Partners Fellowship, and 8VC. They all have fellowships where engineers and even non-engineers can apply. And through this fellowship, they will try to match you with one of their portfolio companies where you can work for one of them. That is the best way to get your foot in the door. Of course, these are all startups. If you're looking for like a bigger FANG company, go through that normal application process. But I recommend, if you are young, entrepreneurial without much experience, startups are the ones that are going to be willing to take a risk on you, especially if they see that you have the hustle and are entrepreneurial in that way.
Yeah, thank you all for those great tips. There's actually a few follow-up questions from the audience on some of the things that were mentioned. So there's a couple of questions around LinkedIn. Parth, or anyone else here, if you would like to kind of share, if you guys would be willing to share in a bit more detail how you go about messaging recruiters. This person asks, what should your goal be when messaging them? Is it to like ask to chat, send them your resume, etc.?
So for me, I've sent maybe in the realms of thousands of messages on LinkedIn at this point. I actually did a workshop at Hack North last year on this kind of exact topic. I can drop the link afterwards, but I'll give you a little TLDR of what it was. And so for me, there's 4 groups of people that I like to reach out to. And this isn't really just LinkedIn specific. It could be pretty much anywhere. It is students, it is recruiters, it is engineers and engineering managers in the realm of engineering. And same could be applied for adjacent roles, but essentially those are the 4 kind of groups you want to target. And not a lot of people will think of students, but the truth is that students at big companies or any kind of company can still put you in touch with their manager, can still have access to the referral portal. And those are the kind of things which are important as when you're looking for a job, right? Now, when you are sending a LinkedIn request, or specifically a LinkedIn request to anybody, the thing you want is really depending on who they are. If it's a recruiter, they want you to be very, very straight to the point. They know you're looking for a job. So you're going to give them a little TLDR about yourself and say why you're a good fit, which roles you've applied to, and you're going to send them your resume. If it's like an engineer or an engineering manager, I would say, you want to build a longer term relationship. You actually want to get to know them, look more for the teams, and look for the fit that we kind of mentioned earlier. And based on that, you want to build a relationship. When you're reaching out to a student, you can do a similar thing where you're trying to get to know more about what kind of work they do, who they are, build a better relationship. And in the future, you might be able to ask for a referral, or to be able to put them in touch with their manager. This kind of thing, I would say it's not as great to do during the recruiting season, especially everything minus the recruiters, basically, because it's a very transactional kind of thing. You want to build a real relationship over a longer period of time. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like you're using them to get a referral, and that's about it. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but hopefully it helps.
No worries. Yeah, thanks for going in all that detail. And yeah, I will find the link to the workshop Parth did actually and put it in the panels channel on Discord. So if you're following along and looking for that talk, it's a really great talk and it goes into a lot more detail. So we'll drop that there. Yeah, anyone else have anything to add on networking, LinkedIn, cold emailing? Any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer like a contrasting opinion, which is that I would just don't use LinkedIn. I personally find it very unaesthetic. I think there's a lot of, for one, like the content is a bit like cringy. A lot of, as Parth said, it's very a transactional place. I've also had a lot of people like report that it's been really bad for their mental health in a very both time-consuming and energy-consuming way. And I genuinely think that like anyone you could reach on LinkedIn, you could reach over an email, even if that means you have to like browse their LinkedIn profile and like guess their like first name at company.com and stuff like that. But in general, I would really not recommend using LinkedIn. And it's also often not as helpful as advertised. I'm sure like once you try it, you'll also experience this where people don't want to message you back. Recruiters are really, really busy and they already have their like regular pipelines of like leaver applications, emails, and obviously engineers are busy and you can't do anything for them is the thing. Like a recruiter, at least you're being like, hey, like you're doing your job and replying to me. But engineers, you'd have to like get them to give you their time and attention.
One thing to add on to Carol's point, sorry, Lucas, is just that you can actually find people's emails. There's a lot of tools, especially the marketing kind of tools, where they have like the pattern for a company down, and you can use those to figure out kind of what pattern the company is using in terms of emails. So that's a great, so if you can find what their name is, you probably can get their email from those if you don't want to be using LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'd add the whole LinkedIn networking thing, also not my vibe. I didn't do that. But I did a lot of community joining in terms of people in our age group, early career in college, people that are entrepreneurial and tech. There's a lot of communities for that around. The one I'm a part of that I favor the most is like Contrary Capital's fellowship program. I love those people. There are others such as ladder.to, online group, great for meeting other people young in tech, looking for jobs or just building things. I think like those are the two that I'm a part of, but there are many out there. Like Gen Z VC is a Discord server that a lot of tech people are into. Look into those. You don't have to find and meet tech people on LinkedIn. I don't like to, at least.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different channels aside from just LinkedIn to find and connect with people. But yeah, just find whatever works for you. I would recommend trying a few of those platforms out and seeing which ones you like and work for you and deciding off of that. All right. Are there any other general tips or advice for standing out, how to stand out when submitting your application or applying that anyone would like to add on? Otherwise, we can move on to the next question. All right.
I'd like to,
Go ahead.
sorry. I was going to add on to the VC fellowship. I saw there was a question in the YouTube about that. the great part about the VC fellowships is that at some of these portfolio companies, you may be one of maybe 2, 3, 4 interns at a startup, because startups just don't have the resources to have more than a few interns. These VC fellowships are great in that you get to have that whole intern class experience with people from just different companies, interning at different portfolio companies. These VC firms will typically also bring in speakers like CEOs and founders of portfolio companies that they have. I'm part of the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship, and we had 3 of the partners of that firm come speak to us, as well as the CEO of Cameo come in and talk about his experience building the company. Those are just some of the benefits outside of just getting matched with one of their portfolio companies.
Oh, thanks for adding on to that question. All right, so the next question, or the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is, so after applying, hopefully you hear back from a company or multiple companies. Now at this stage, how do you go about preparing for these interviews? And for those in the audience who might have not done a technical interview before, if you could briefly share your experience of like what to expect, and yeah, how you've prepared for them. Maisha, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. So I think this is a really good question, especially since you're talking about like once you actually have reached the interview stage. And I think that's like really critical, because I think like up into leading into like once you get an online assessment or an opportunity to do a technical interview with an engineer, I think like that's the hardest obstacle to get over. Like that's once you've reached that point, your resume doesn't matter anymore. It's all about how you demonstrate your problem solving skills and your communication skills and your collaboration skills, like in that process. So I think one thing for sure is definitely ace those data structures and algorithm fundamentals. Typically, you don't need anything past maybe your first algorithms course in university. You're definitely, I think a lot of people might have a misconception to over prepare at this point and maybe like try to take on and learn really challenging concepts that you're not going to see in an interview. So you're not really going to see like some complex dynamic programming. You're not going to see like a very niche algorithm. Instead, just focus on practicing coding with arrays and strings, maybe a tree, maybe a dictionary. And I think like a really good way to do this is definitely like LeetCode when you're getting yourself off the ground and like practicing the actual technical portion. But leading up to the interview, maybe a few days before, reach out to an upper year student, ask for a mock interview. I really wish more people asked me for mock interviews because I'm super happy to help. And actually like do the interview while talking to another person, and that practice, well, makes perfect. So that's my advice.
Yeah, just a couple things to add on to that. So for me, the way I break my kind of every interview cycle or prep, the way I break it down is you target patterns and you target kind of, and the way you do it is by spaced repetition. So you'll have kind of, let's say you're working on strings. Now you'll do strings for like a day or two, and you'll do those questions, and you don't do them for a while, and you do them a week later, for example. You should still know how to do those string questions, for example. And that's kind of the ability you want to build up. You know those patterns so well that regardless of what question comes at you, you're able to employ, whether it's a data structure to help you solve that pattern, or if it's like something like a 2-pointer to help you solve whatever it is, their patterns, and you just need to be able to recognize them and use them.
Yeah, thanks Parth and Maisha for those tips. Does anyone here have any tips for the behavioral parts of the interview? So I know technical interviews make up the majority of a lot of interviews for software, but usually behavioral interviews do also play important roles. So any advice for that section?
Yeah, I would recommend being empathetic to the interviewer. Put yourself in their shoes. I recommend all of you join a club that brings on new members and like some application process, so you can be in the shoes of someone who's interviewing for culture and fit. Then you can understand, where they're coming from when they ask certain questions, and the best way to tell your story such that you're revealing something valuable about yourself. Yeah, I think that's the best way. Be honest. Everyone can tell if you're BSing or not. Interviewers are humans too. They're not dumb.
Yeah, for sure. I really like your tip about putting yourself in the shoes of an interviewer and going through that process, because I think after doing just a few of those, you realize kind of how to tell like what's a very generic or not very genuine answer and what's more authentic. And hopefully that helps you with crafting your responses and just being more authentic.
Yeah, to add on to that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Lucas. I'll go after.
Okay, I'd say that also remember, most of these interviewers are probably new grads, so they could be you in a few years. Like, they're not some crazy superhuman adults. It's me. I'm 22. I'm going to ask you some questions. Maybe I like your answer. No pressure.
Yeah, all I was gonna add was, especially in like first year, second year, like early on, I don't, from what I remember, my technical questions were either just strings or arrays, and we actually ended up focusing a lot on the behavioral aspect of things. So I do think, for the more junior internships, it is more common to focus more on the behavioral aspect. And I still remember on the last day of my first internship, I asked my manager, why'd you hire me? And his biggest response, or what he said was, the biggest thing that we hired you for was your willingness to learn. And I think demonstrating that, regardless of how old you are, how much you know, if you can demonstrate that well and you say, I'm a sponge, I'm going to come in here, absorb as much as I can and do as much as I can, that's the biggest thing, I think, biggest like green signal that they look for.
Yeah, for sure. I think adding on to that, like even when applying, when putting it in your resume, a lot of times you won't have all the technical skills or experience for the job, but a lot of times they're just looking for someone who is willing to learn. A lot of it is learning on the job, and they just want to see that potential in you. So don't worry too much about not meeting every technical requirement or hard skill. If you can demonstrate your enthusiasm during the behavioral interview, I think that's a really a good first step. So thanks everyone for those great tips on interviewing. And we'll move on to, I think we'll have two more questions and then we'll move on to audience Q&A. The next question I wanted to ask was, what are some misconceptions about the first internship? Like misconceptions you've heard around, or misconceptions you had before applying or starting your first internship?
I had a misconception that I had to be the perfect candidate. And I know that sounds silly now, but I think there is like, maybe when you spend time on LinkedIn or you see other students getting roles, like you're like, oh, that person's an international math Olympiad. That person's really good at LeetCode. That person has like 10 really cool hackathon projects. That person's won an entrepreneurship competition. And there's kind of this expectation that like, oh, in order to get an internship, I need to have a 4.0 GPA. I need to take graduate level coursework. I need to like win every single MLH event that I go to. And it's like, I think it's stepping back and realizing that no one expects you to do that. And also it's not possible to do that. I think like play up to your own strengths. If you don't like research, then don't put yourself through research. If you like going to hackathons instead of like focusing on your GPA, then do that. And I think like, as long as you have something that's like uniquely you, then play up your brand, and that can be a really strong suit.
Yeah, I'll take it one step farther, which is that like, no one cares how many hackathons you've won. Like, I talked to the recruiters after the like first two internships I got. I didn't go to school either, and they just did not care. They're like, "Oh, you want a hackathon? I didn't know that." They're like, the me winning hackathons wasn't what got me the job. It was like the side effects of like I worked really hard at hackathons, and so I went to a lot of them and I learned a lot at each of them. That's really what does it, and like you just don't have to worry about that. Like lots of employers won't even know what a hackathon is. They definitely won't know what a math Olympiad is. These are just often things that aren't that relevant to your job applications.
What one misconception that I had going into my internships, honestly, I still like have them from time to time, is that I need to be in the sense like once I do have the internship, like I need to be absolutely perfect going into it. And sometimes I completely forget how slow onboarding can be and how slow sometimes you have to take or how much time you have to ramp up. And I feel like as interns, you sometimes forget that you can actually make mistakes and that they account for you making mistakes. So if you do make mistakes, it's fine. And I would beat myself up all the time because I was like, oh, damn it, I missed that bug. And like my manager saw, oh no. And then, you kind of just not have a great time. But if you change your mindset a little bit and are like, oh, if I make these mistakes here, it's a better learning opportunity than me doing it in the full-time role, like 5 years down the road, perhaps, right? Like that's a little bit worse. Or like, oh no, I took down prod on my third day. Like that's like it's fine. you're an intern. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Like it's fine.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. I know those are definitely a lot. All of what you guys said are things that I could relate to going into my first internship. All right, we'll move on. For the sake of time, we'll move on to the last question before we get into audience Q&A. So the last one related to, I think, what Maija said earlier for this question around seeing like other people get all these jobs on LinkedIn, for example. I know that can add a lot of pressure and also anxiety in the recruitment process. How does everyone here deal with this pressure and anxiety of finding an internship? And do you have any advice for people who are currently feeling this right now, as it is recruitment season?
I think one thing is if you are spending time on LinkedIn looking at other people's accomplishments, which I don't recommend doing to a very long extent. I mean, cheer on your friends, but if you find that it's like affecting your mental health, maybe not. I think one thing to keep in mind is that like everybody's timeline is different. Some people will get internships in August, and some people will not get their internship like until May, like right before school ends. So keep that in mind. Like it's not a race. It's really not. Find something good for you.
Yeah, I think something else to think in mind is that you sometimes don't actually know what you want. When I was looking for my second internship, Shopify was my fifth choice. And I was so upset that I didn't get one of the other four. And in hindsight, like, I just picked incorrectly. I didn't know like anything about tech or companies or specifically Shopify. And I'm like, I really could not have been anywhere better. So there's just no point applying that kind of pressure to yourself.
Yeah, for me, especially like I feel like in first and second year, I was constantly comparing myself to other people, especially with like that kind of Cali or bus mentality where I was like, oh no, this person made it to Cali in first year. Like, what am I doing that's wrong? And I feel for me, the biggest thing that kind of helped me accelerate and learn more and really just focus on how I was doing things better was by taking a step back, calming myself down and really saying, okay, everyone's doing great. That's good for them. How am I going to do better? What is going to make me feel happy? And going with that really allows you to, one, take the edge off for everything you see on social media, but then also just really understand and clear your path and give you some clarity into what you need to do to get to where you want. And I think that really helped me with the anxiety aspect of applying everywhere. And you're hearing back, you're not hearing back, you're kind of always in this superposition state where you don't know what's going on. So just take a step back. It's fine. You will hear back eventually, and you will figure it out. And I think that's the best kind of anxiety tip I could give.
I got two things. One being perspective. My parents and grandparents are immigrants, came to the US. My grandfather came to the US broke, like literally with pennies, and had to find a job and figure things out, you know? You're whatever, 19-year-old trying to figure out your internship, you know, you're working on a college degree or something, like it's fine. It'll work out, you know, like things will work out. Hopefully you're not starving. But like put things in perspective. Number two, in terms of putting things in perspective, the internship isn't the end all for getting a job or getting experience for your resume, whatever, you know, like for me, I never got stressed about getting an internship because worst comes to worst, I'll do my own thing. I'll build an app over the summer, you know, launch a website, do something cool like that, be my own boss. Great part of the internet. You can learn everything online. And honestly, in some cases, that could be even more impressive. This kid spent his summer building his own app, his own site, his own service, you know, shows initiative and willingness to learn that employers will like. So worst case scenario, do your own thing. If you need income, go, or Starbucks a thing in Canada, go do that.
Yeah, thanks everyone so much. Thank you everyone for sharing. And yeah, I think adding on to some of the points that you all mentioned around like your own timeline and setting your like own goals, a lot of that pressure, yeah, figuring out what you really want for yourself is important and not basing your goals off of what you see other people are doing. And it ties back to like setting goals for what you're looking for to from your internship experience. So yeah, don't let all the external factors, like make you think you're not achieving a goal, which might not even be your own goal in the first place. All right, and with that, we'll move on to audience Q&A. So thanks for everyone who submitted a question. If you still have questions, you can continue to add them in the Slido. We'll try to get through as many as possible, but apologies if we don't, since there are quite a few. But the first one is actually related to, Lucas, what you were just saying about projects. Someone asked if you would be willing to share examples of side projects you guys have worked on, or what you had on your resume before your very first internship.
Nice, I could do this. I think this is what Lucas, after doing the Udemy course, you know, still trying to figure out what coding is. But definitely back then, first thing I did was put up a website. I wanted to code it, not use some click and drag thing because I thought it was cool. I used this weird Ruby framework called Jekyll. I think it's actually deprecated these days, but you know, set up a website. It makes you look like a cool coder. Honestly, you could use Webflow these days. I don't think people can tell. The other thing that was my Udemy course had a capstone project where it allowed me to demonstrate my knowledge of React, Postgres, and the MVC model. You know, that's the great thing about these project-based courses. You do finish with a project that you get to show off. And no one cares if it's from a course. Like you got to demonstrate that you worked on a React, Express, Postgres-based web app.
Yeah. Also, just to add one thing onto Lucas's point, if you are doing a course on Udemy, make sure to build something from it, even if it doesn't have like a project alongside it. If you just put down you did the course, it doesn't show as much as actually building things. The way I tell people is, you're an engineer, you should be building things. That's the easiest way to kind of think about it, and other people want to see you build things. So just go build. That's the easiest way to put it. And the other thing I'd say is, if you're interested in a specific area of tech, and you know those are the kind of internships you want to tackle, this applies less so early on. But once you start getting a little bit more specialized, once you figure out what kind of things you want to do, or even if you know what you want to try out, let's say you want to do machine learning, go build machine learning based projects, because that's what's going to show your initiative, show that you're interested in learning, and give you, and if you learn the more applicable technologies to wherever you're applying, they're more likely to hire you as well.
Yeah, thanks, President Lucas, for sharing. Another question another question is, some recruiters prefer more experience with respect to academic years. So even if, let's say, you're matching in skill, how would you go about showing this in a short interview?
Yeah, I think what happens here is not that the recruiters are looking for more academic experience. It's that they're looking for you to graduate sooner. In general, it's not common that interns are actually productive. In fact, like Google publicly states that their full-time employees are not productive until 6 months, and they don't expect them to be, and they're not supposed to be. So, like, obviously, how can you in your internship be actually productive? They're here to like mentor you and try to hire you full time. So it's just not something you make up for in an interview. To like, you don't have to show them you have like academic abilities, because they don't care. At least I hope they don't. I don't have a degree. But yeah.
I've kind of run into this a few times, like early on, and I think like my approach to it has always been to like understand first of all that they're trying to like fill out headcount needs and to have empathy with like the purpose that they're hiring is for full-time conversions in a lot of sense. So sometimes they just don't have the space. But definitely, if this is an opportunity to stay in touch with that recruiter, like email them following summer, like a month or two before the application's open, and they'll remember you and go from there. So I think that's just setting up for you to be successful in the future.
Yeah, fun fact, like I actually interviewed for Deloitte for my first internship, and I did not get it, but I stayed in touch with the interviewer, and we built some sort of relationship over that kind of year that went by, or like I guess 6, 7 months, whatever it was, and then we talked again. I interviewed again, and when I reached out to him again, and I told him, hey, these were the skills you were looking for last time. This is what I've been working on. I think I'd be a good fit this time. And you go in and you kind of get another shot at it. And I think that's a pretty interesting way. So even if like, don't get too discouraged if you didn't get it this time around. Keep that door open. Keep building that relationship if possible, because those kind of things really do help you in the long term.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. I think there was a question earlier around actually like maintaining and building these relationships. I know a few of you touched on earlier about how to send out like that initial message, like on LinkedIn or email, but do you have any tips on how to maintain and build those relationships, whether that's with recruiters or like upper years or like people you look up to as mentors, for example?
I guess first, for recruiters, recognize that they are probably reaching out to hundreds, thousands of applicants at a time. They won't respond to your email probably for a week. That doesn't mean you shouldn't follow up though. Definitely follow up a day after, a few days after, because it will get lost in their inbox. Beyond that too, keep in mind how full-time recruiting and internship recruiting timelines work. Recruiters aren't going to be super excited to open an intern's email when it's May, because their company's not looking for interns at that moment. But if you reach out in mid-August to September to the recruiter, that's when interns are on top of their mind and recruiting's on top of their mind. So they're like checking their emails more frequently and ready to like take you into the funnel at that point. Because if you reach out in May, they'll just respond with, hey, thanks for reaching out. Great catching up. Try again in August. So keep those timelines in mind, and keep in mind that they're very busy people.
I might just have weird psychology, but it's during intern season where you don't want to hear from another prospective applicant. If you like reach out off season, I might like set up the interview and make sure you get interviewed when you're supposed to, or just interview you really early. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Carol with that. I usually start reaching out to people around anywhere from 3 to 6 months before I'm actually supposed to start looking, just to, start knowing people, what's available. If there's like someone working on a specific technology, I'll just reach out to them. And I'm not even thinking about internships directly. My main goal is to meet some cool people and build a relationship. And if it leads to something, that's great. If it doesn't, well, that's fine too. I met another cool person.
Yeah, to add on to mine, I was referring to reaching out to recruiters you already knew. Do that in the recruiting season, because then they could just like push you straight to onsite or something.
All right, and we'll do two more quicker questions, and we'll wrap up from there. But there's a question from, I think, someone currently in high school. If you all have any tips specifically for high schoolers who are looking to get an internship. So I think, Parth, you mentioned you had an internship summer of grade 12 or after grade 12.
Yep.
And Carol, I know you worked right out of high school as well.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Carol. It's okay. Oh, you're on mute.
I did my first internship in high school. I think there's nothing special to do. The only special thing is to like figure out which companies are willing to do this. One weird thing I experienced is I actually like interviewed with companies and like went through their on-site and everything. And at one point they were like, "No, you're in high school." But other than that, it's really the same process. There might be like some things I think I recommend against telling people that you're in high school and you're a baby. It's just not been helpful.
For me, it was a little bit different. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with like the JA company program, but it's essentially just like a 14 or 16-week program, something like that, where you start your own startup underneath an existing business. And what I did was I went there a couple terms and I got really close with the people there. And when I knew I was going to go into engineering, they had tech stuff there. I was like, hey, are you all looking for interns? And they're like, not really, but what are you thinking of? And so I had like a pre-existing connection there, which I built on top of, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for internship. And the way I got it approved, so like in Ontario, you can get a co-op credit in high school, which is how I got it approved. It was an unpaid internship, didn't have to be an unpaid internship, but it's easier to do it that way. And I felt like it did really help me. Plus in grade 12, I didn't really know a lot, so it was a great experience for me to spend my summer that way. But I think once you're in university, I would highly recommend against unpaid internships. I feel you should be getting paid for your work. But other than that, just talk to people, not work.
Oh, I should say right now that Shopify will hire people in any stage in their career. There are also people who have internet Shopify who are trying to get into tech after being like a chef or a pro gamer. Sounds very similar to programmer, I know.
Yeah, thanks, Carol and Parth. All right, so we will do one last quick question, which is, when do companies start hiring for summer internships? And perhaps we can talk about this a bit more broadly, like how far in advance should you start looking at postings? When do postings open? If you all could share from like your experiences.
I'd say for startups, if you're looking for something that's like 100-person, around that number of employees, they'll probably start posting their internships around November, December, January, February. It's a much later timeline for startups. The company I'm currently working at, I didn't interview with them until March. Yeah.
For finance, I would say August, September. For large international tech companies, I'd say September, October, November, December. And for Canadian companies, I would say January, maybe February. Oh, and for research, I'd say like March, April.
Damn, you really know everything. I think and in terms of like when to apply, from what I've spoken to recruiters with, it's kind of on a rolling basis. So if you're looking at just like the stats, you will have a better chance if you do apply early. So if you're prepared, I would say go earlier, just because you will have, just statistically speaking, you'll have a better chance of interviewing.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies do interviews and fill up spots on a rolling basis. So the earlier you are, the more spots there are open. But yeah, thanks everyone for giving a detailed breakdown of the timelines. And yeah, if you're not sure, for those in the audience, if you're not sure, I I know a mistake I definitely made in my first year and second year was not realizing how early a lot of these applications open. So just keep an eye out and keep checking just to be safe if there are like certain places you really want to work for. But yeah, and with that, that's a wrap on our panel today. Thank you so much to the people who submitted questions to ask. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but I know a lot of panelists are on Discord. There is a panels Discord channel, so you can opt into that and they'll be there to answer questions. Or if they are okay with sharing their any like handles, you can contact them there as well. But you can check Discord for that information. But yeah, thank you, Carol, Parth, Lucas, and Maija so much for being here and sharing your time and your experience and wisdom with everyone in the audience today. And thank you to all those watching. I hope you learned something and took something away from this panel, and best of luck on your internship hunting. Yeah, with that, enjoy the rest of Hack the North, and yeah, have a great rest of your night or day wherever you are.
See ya.